Hi friends, I'm Emily Calandrelli, MIT aerospace engineer and your friendly neighborhood space gal, and welcome to my channel where we talk about all things space and science. In this video, we are going to continue to read Ada Lace on the Case, the first book in the Ada Lace Adventure series. This book is about Ada, a third grader who loves science and technology, and she goes on adventures to solve mysteries and problems with tech and gadgets that she builds herself. So find a cozy reading chair and grab a book to follow along, because we're about to end the story of Ada Lace on the Case. We're beginning with chapter 13. To listen to the first 12 chapters, see my previous two videos that I'll link below. Chapter 13, Defying Gravity. Ada walked into the garden. It was strange walking by all the homes she had studied from her window, like visiting a place you had only seen on TV. She noticed a coffee cup still on Jacob's patio. Ms. Reed's flowers drooped. She felt a stab of sadness for the woman who had lost her best friend. When she reached Nina's building, she rang the bell for the apartment. There was no answer. After a minute, she rang again, but still no answer. She decided to go back down the block and wait a while. Just across the street from Mr. Peebles' building, there was a little triangle with benches and flower beds. A couple of people were sitting, looking at their phones. She found a bench away from the street and took out her book. There was a tree in front of Mr. Peebles' building, but she could still see most of his window. She thought she saw someone moving around inside. She fished her binoculars out for a better look. Mr. Peebles was in there, but she couldn't see what he was doing or what was in the room. She was dying to know what he was up to. A few minutes later, Mr. Peebles came out the front door and walked down Polymer Street. How many times had he exited from this side without Ada knowing? She looked up at his window through the binoculars. His apartment appeared empty. It was now or never. With her gecko gloves, she could climb the front of his building, place the camera, and make her way back down. But could she make it without being seen? Nina had climbed up the tree near Milton's apartment in seconds, but she didn't have a cast on one of her legs. Ada was afraid, but she was also determined. When she was in front of Mr. Peebles' building, she looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then she sat down on the stoop and pulled out her gecko gloves. She slipped them on and put her gloved hands against the wall. They held firmly. It was exciting. Slowly and cautiously, she began to scale the building. She had always wanted to be able to cling to the walls like a lizard. She had to jam her cast against the wall, but she made her way up to Mr. Peebles' window and peered inside. Ada couldn't believe her eyes. Mr. Peebles had a lab beyond her wildest dreams. There were computers that all seemed to be running different scenarios and predicting outcomes. In the corner was a set of shelves with toolboxes labeled with black magic marker. Bolts, transistors, resistors, capacitors, rivets. All the basic necessities for making cool gadgets. The other side of the room had shelves from floor to ceiling that were filled with books. It was better than Disneyland. Ada had to stop herself from climbing inside. She was just reaching for the little camera when, bark! Ada was so startled she jerked back away from the windowsill. The gecko gloves lost contact with the wall and she fell with a crash. Oh! Ow! The fall had knocked the air out of Ada. She was struggling to breathe. She still had no air in her lungs and was starting to panic. Ada had no idea how long Mr. Peebles would be gone. She had to get out of there before he returned. Then, as if from nowhere, Nina's face appeared above her. "Ada, are you okay?" Nina asked. Ada gasped. She could breathe again. "Nina, I'm so happy to see you," said Ada. "I'm really sorry about before. I tried to stop by, but you weren't there and—" "Never mind," said Nina. "Let's get out of here before Mr. Peebles catches us." Chapter 14. Everything Happens. Nina did her best to walk her bike while also helping Ada. "You saved me, Nina, even though I was a jerk," said Ada. "I'm so sorry." "I know that you weren't being mean," said Nina. "Everyone's a little crazy sometimes, right? It's not such a bad thing." "What I did sure was crazy," said Ada. Did you climb all the way up to his window? Asked Nina. Yeah, I would have been fine, but I got startled by a bark, said Ada. So he does have Marguerite, said Nina. Well, I'm not sure. It didn't really sound like Marguerite. In fact, it didn't sound like any dog I'd heard before. Really? Well, what was it? Asked Nina. I don't know, said Ada. They stopped at Nina's building so she could drop off her bike and let her mom know she had to help Ada. Then they continued slowly toward Ada's house. It's so lucky that I happened by when I did. It was a really happy coincidence? Asked Ada. Yeah, said Nina. And, you know, everything happens for a reason. Ada smiled. Nina was a good friend. They didn't always see things in the same way, but that wasn't a bad thing. When they got to Ada's door, Ada realized that she had no idea what to tell her father. Nina rang the bell. They heard footsteps inside and then the door opened. Girls, he said. Then he looked at Ada closely. He pulled a leaf from her hair and examined her cracked cast. What happened? She tripped, said Nina. Oh, Ada, said Mr. Lace. Let's get you upstairs. Nina took Ada's backpack and followed them. Mr. Lace got Ada settled and then turned to Nina. Do you need to get home, Nina? It's going to be dark soon. Can Nina stay for a bit? Asked Ada. Okay, but only 5 minutes, said Mr. Lace. You got it, Mr. Lace, said Nina. Ada's father seemed satisfied and left. Do you think you can plant this camera in the tree in front of Mr. Peebles' apartment? No sweat, said Nina. Maybe I can take a peek while I'm up there. Ada looked out the window just as Mr. Peebles came out of the building. Nina, it's Mr. Peebles. Mr. Peebles walked to the far end of the street to one of the neighbors' trash cans. He stopped and looked around, as if making sure that no one was watching him. Then he opened the trash can and slid something from under his coveralls into it. He closed the lid and headed back inside. What do you think it was? Asked Nina. I don't know, but we have to find out, Ada replied. Gotcha, said Nina. I'll take a look on the way home and let you know. Okay, be careful, said Ada. I'll see you tomorrow. Nina grabbed the little camera and left. Ada watched out the window as Nina slid stealthily along the buildings at the edge of the garden toward the trash can. She looked to the right, she looked to the left. Then she quickly pushed the lid of the trash can off, peeked inside, and popped it back on and headed toward her apartment. A few minutes later, Ada heard a chime. She checked her tablet. There was a message from Nina. Milk bones. Chapter 15. The Final Suspect. The next day, Mr. Lace took Ada to see the doctor. Ada would have to stay in a cast for a few extra days to be safe. They replaced the old cast because it had a crack in the fall. Ada's mom was due home later that day, and Ada hoped that she didn't ask too many questions. Ms. Lace always asked more questions than Mr. Lace. When she got home, Ada parked herself by the window. Nina had set up the camera in the tree as planned. Ada watched the back room on the tablet and kept her eye on the garden windows at the same time. 1 p.m. Blue sky. Sun. Big puffy white clouds. 25 or so sparrows, 1 chipmunk, 3 squirrels. Observations. Mr. Peebles came in and checked some of the monitors, picked up a coil of wire, and left the room. Ada was beginning to have doubts about invading another neighbor's privacy. Every time she saw Mr. Peebles talking with Jacob, he seemed quite pleasant. Would he really hurt somebody's beloved pet? Sure, he brought odd things home, but they didn't seem to be harmful. In fact, some of the things that Ada collected might be considered odd too. She glanced at the soil samples she brought from West Virginia. Just then, she saw Mr. Peebles staring out his window down at the garden. Ada looked through her binoculars and saw him putting what looked like a small furry animal into a garbage bag. Then he left the room. After a few minutes, she saw him exit the garden through the alley, carrying the trash bag. Ada gasped. She raced to the phone and called Nina. "Come over," she said. After what seemed like an eternity, Nina arrived. "You're finally here," cried Ada. "I think Mr. Peebles shoved Marguerite in a garbage bag and put her in the trash." "Oh no," cried Nina. "I don't know, but I think you better stay over tonight." "Is it okay with your dad?" said Nina. "It's usually okay with my dad, but my mom gets home and..." Ada, love! Ada's mother burst into the room, ran straight to Ada's chair, and hugged her. Ada's heart rate skyrocketed. And you must be Nina. Hello! Welcome home, Ms. Lace, said Nina. Ada tried to slip the binoculars under a chair cushion, but she wasn't fast enough. What's happening here? Ada's mom said, eyeing the binoculars, the tablet, and the telescope. Ada said. We're studying the urban ecosystem, said Nina. That's right. I'm telling Nina about field guides, and she's helping me observe Juniper Garden. Well, okay, said Miss Lace. Ada convinced her mother to let Nina stay the night. Ada could tell that her mom was happy that Ada had made a friend. Nina rushed home to grab some clothes and a toothbrush. On the way back, she ran into Milton. Ada saw them arguing in the garden. Get lost, Milton P. Edison, Nina yelled. You don't know what you're talking about. You never do. In a minute, she was back in Ada's room. What happened? Asked Ada. Just Milton being Milton. He knows we're watching Mr. Peebles, said Nina. We need to find out for sure if Mr. Peebles took Marguerite before Milton gives us away, said Ada. Ada and Nina kept their eyes glued to the tablet. Mr. Peebles moved back and forth from the lab to the window across from Ada's. Occasionally, he seemed to be talking to someone at floor level, like a small dog perhaps. If only we could see below the windowsill, said Ada. Oh, look, he's leaving. I could sneak into his apartment, said Nina. How will you get in? Ada asked. Don't worry, I'll find a way, said Nina. Ada had learned enough about Nina to know that this was true. Okay, but be careful. Ada handed Nina one of her walkie-talkies. Press the emergency button if you get into trouble. Ada watched Nina cross the garden. Then she watched the tablet, waiting for her friend to appear on the screen. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Milton come out of his building and run around the fence and up to the alley. What is he up to? She wondered. Back on the tablet, Nina was framed in the second-floor hallway window right next to Mr. Peebles' apartment. When Ada looked into the garden again, Milton was walking back through the alley with Mr. Peebles. Oh, great. Ada picked up her walkie-talkie. Nina, come in. Nina, over. Nina didn't answer. Ada looked down at the tablet. Nina was climbing out of the hallway window. Ada held her breath. Nina maneuvered herself over to Mr. Peebles' lab window and pushed it open. Once inside, Nina faced the camera and waved. She moved around Mr. Peebles' lab, then dropped out of sight. Suddenly, a fuzzy face appeared on the tablet. Ada screamed. It was a squirrel. There was a flurry of leaves and the camera dropped to the ground. Ada tried to call Nina again. Nina, Nina, come in! Ada's mom walked in. Hi, girls. I have some shortbread. Where'd Nina go? Ada answered. Ada turned to the window. Milton Edison was back in his apartment staring straight at Ada's window. She turned to Mr. Peebles' window. He was inside, feeding the fish. Chapter 16, The Marguerite Test. Oh no, said Ada. Ada, what is it? Said Ms. Lace. Nina isn't back, said Ada, and I'm worried. Across the street, Mr. Peebles walked out of the room with the fish tank. Ada imagined him finding Nina hiding in his lab. Ada looked urgently at her walkie-talkie, as if she could will a warning over it. Ada Lace, said Miss Lace, spill it, now. Oh, Mommy, I don't know what I've done, said Ada. Nina is hiding in Mr. Peebles' apartment. What? Said Miss Lace. Why? Well, said Ada, wondering where to begin. You can explain later, said Miss Lace. We better go get Nina before she's in real trouble. Ada's mom and Ada made their way to Mr. Peebles'. Ada could see Milton in his window smirking at her. Miss Lace rang the bell, and after a long minute, Mr. Peebles answered the buzzer and let them up. It was strange to see him up close. He had a pleasant, round face. He definitely didn't look like a dog killer. Oh, hello! You must be Nina's friend, Mr. Peebles said to Ada. And you are Miss Lace? Yes, said Ada's mother. "How are you, Mr. Peebles?" "Good, thanks. Come in," said Mr. Peebles. "I'm sure you're very curious about what your friend has been up to." Ada and her mother followed Mr. Peebles into his apartment. They were greeted by Marguerite. She wiggled all over. Mr. Peebles bent to scratch her ears. Ada was relieved to see the dog was happy. "I'm so sorry about this. I don't know what the girls were thinking," said Miss Lace. "Oh, no, please," said Mr. Peebles. "They were curious. There should be more curious people in the world." Mr. Peebles opened the door to his lab. "I've been working on building the perfect pet, which Marguerite certainly is. I only plan to keep her a day or so, take some videos, and give her back before Ms. Reed missed her too much." Ada heard a familiar, awkward, mechanical barking. Bark! Bark! They followed Mr. Peebles into the lab. It was even more spectacular than Ada remembered. "Wow," Ada said. On top of the computers and shelves of books and manuals of all different kinds, there were 3 drones piled by the window. Unlike Milton's toy drone, these had been custom built. Stacked on shelves in the corner were several half-finished dog robots. Nina was in the corner playing with one of the models. "Sit, Rodney," Nina said to the robo-dog. The dog sat. It had long, silky fur and big brown eyes like Marguerite, but the eyes shifted around unnaturally. Then there was his bark. "Bark, bark," said the robot dog. "Good dog," said Nina. "Isn't he sweet?" "Well," said Ms. Lace, "he's certainly an accomplishment, Mr. Peebles." "I'm glad you think so, but he's missing something, and quite a bit of it. I tried to use Marguerite as a model, but Rodney's not the companion she is. I just can't get the coding right," said Mr. Peebles. "Ruck!" said Marguerite. "Bark!" said Rodney. Ada could see immediately what Mr. Peebles meant. Rodney was dog-like, but his movements were awkward and mechanical. She wondered if you could give the Turing test to a dog. In the Turing test, a person talks to a computer. If the computer can trick the person into believing it is also human, that means the computer passes the test. It was clear that Rodney hadn't passed the Marguerite test. Marguerite was never going to sniff that robot's butt. "I don't see how I can ever get Rodney to be as lovely as Marguerite," said Mr. Peebles. "But you still have to give her back," said Ada. "Oh, I know," said Mr. Peebles. The buzzer rang. "That will be Miss Reed." "Oh," said Miss Lace. "So you really did just borrow her?" "As I said," said Mr. Peebles. He pressed the door lock button. Rodney made what Ada guessed was a whining noise, but it sounded more like a rusty hinge. Then he waddled over to the door and dropped a pile of batteries on the carpet. "Bad boy, Rodney," said Nina. "It's okay, Nina," said Mr. Peebles. "He'll never be a real dog." He opened the door for Ms. Reed. "Oh, hello, girls. Miss Lace," said Miss Reed. "May I please have my Marguerite back now, Mr. Peebles? I'm lost without her." Marguerite yelped and squealed. She made happy figure eights around her mistress's ankles. "There's a good girl," said Miss Reed. "She's all yours. Thank you, Edna," said Mr. Peebles. "She has been a delight." "You don't have to tell me," said Miss Reed. "I'm off to finish my needlepoint. Ta!" "Well, there goes another failed project," said Mr. Peebles. "You just need more time," said Ada. "But I've lost my model," said Mr. Peebles. "I think I know where you can find a good replacement," said Nina. "He might not be exactly the same as Marguerite, but at least you'd get to keep him." Chapter 17. Back to School. The first day of school had seemed so far away at the start of the summer, but suddenly it was upon them. Ada was excited, but nervous. She'd never been the new girl before. Luckily, she had a friend already. She also had a boot to replace her cast, which allowed her to move around better. The day after the girls had found Marguerite, they had accompanied Mr. Peebles to the dog shelter. Mr. Peebles was thrilled with his new companion, Alan. Nina was right. The dog looked a lot like Marguerite, and he seemed to love Mr. Peebles right away. Marguerite and Alan became fast friends. Sometimes they let Rodney tag along too. Nina and Ada walked to school with Mr. Lace and Captain Bluebeard. Only he was Elliot the Magnificent now. He wore a cape and a hat and carried a wand. "Behold, a perfectly normal top hat," said Elliot. He reached into the hat. "But inside, a little turtle." "Elliot," said Ada, "you can't bring hydrogen to school." "But she's my assistant," said Elliot. "She can assist you when you get home," said Mr. Lace. It was his first day of school too. He was the new art teacher. Along the way to school, they passed Mr. Peebles walking Alan. "See you this afternoon, kids," Mr. Peebles called. "He's so nice," Ada said to Nina. "I can't believe we thought he kidnapped Marguerite. And I can't believe he wasn't mad that you snuck into his apartment." "Well, I didn't really sneak in," Nina said. "But I saw you climb through the window," said Ada. "I know," said Nina. Her eyes drifted down to the pavement. "I got into the building because Mr. Peebles' neighbor left the door open, but Mr. Peebles came back upstairs just as I was about to try his door. He invited me in to meet Rodney. So I asked him if I could try climbing through the window. I wanted you to be impressed." "I am impressed, Nina," said Ada. "I'm impressed by how silly you are." Nina gave Ada a gentle punch on the arm. "It's too bad Mr. Peebles isn't really building a spaceship," said Nina. "Maybe we should build one." "I like the way you think, Nina." Behind the science. Drones. Drones are flying vehicles that you can operate with a remote control. The way a drone flies is similar to a helicopter. A helicopter has propellers, which act like spinning wings. When a propeller spins fast enough, it pushes air down below the helicopter, causing the helicopter to lift up in the air. There are usually 4 sets of propellers on a drone, which could also be called a quadcopter. Quad meaning 4. Each propeller helps to lift the drone off the ground. I have friends who connect cameras to their drones and fly them to beautiful areas of San Francisco. That way, they can get a drone's eye view of the city, as long as you have the proper certifications to fly it. Ecosystem. An ecosystem is a complex community of living things, like plants and animals interacting together in their environment. I live in San Francisco, so I get to see many of the same ecosystems that Ada does. Ada's urban ecosystem includes her neighbors, their pets, and all of the plants in her backyard. In an ecosystem, everyone has their own role to play and contribute something. The actors in an ecosystem often depend on one another in some way. If you took one neighbor away from Juniper Garden, for example, Ada's ecosystem would be disrupted. Wireless camera. Some wireless cameras can connect to an app on a phone or tablet using Wi-Fi. Once you use your app to connect to the camera, you can see real-time camera footage from your phone or tablet. Because you don't have to be near the camera to be able to see the footage, you can place it up to 500 feet away and still be able to connect to it remotely. This makes it a great spying tool for Ada. I've used wireless cameras to film exciting things that would be too difficult to capture with a handheld camera. I've connected wireless cameras to roller coasters, human centrifuges designed for astronauts. They spin around really fast like a merry-go-round and make an astronaut experience higher gravitational force. And I've even used them underwater to watch astronauts train in a huge pool at NASA. Gecko gloves. The design of gecko gloves is inspired by the gecko's feet. Geckos can stick to surfaces and climb vertical walls because their toes are covered in hundreds of tiny hairs. The little hairs are so small that they can fit into the contours of walls. An engineering student named Elliot Hawks at Stanford University used similar principles to create a material that allowed him to climb up walls like Spider-Man. Elliot could be seen scaling walls around campus when he was testing out his gecko gloves design. Each glove has a number of individual reptile-inspired patches with hair-like nanofibers that can cling to surfaces. But remember, not everyone is a gecko. Do not scale walls without proper equipment and supervision. Turing test. The Turing test was developed by a man named Alan Turing to determine if a machine can think like a human. If a computer passes the Turing test, it is considered to be artificially intelligent and indistinguishable from a real person. In the test, an evaluator would chat online with 2 partners. One would be a human and one would be a computer program. If the evaluator couldn't tell which one was the human and which one was the computer, then the computer would pass the Turing test. While some have come close, no computer to date has passed the Turing test. What do you think technology will look like once computers and robots become as smart as humans? I'm actually not sure if this is still true. I believe AI programs could easily pass the Turing test. So this book was written in 2016, published in 2017. It might need an update for the Turing test. Thank you so much for reading Ada Lace on the Case with me. This is the first of 6 books in the Ada Lace Adventure series. If you want a curriculum guide that matches to Common Core and NGSS standards, I've linked that below. Stay tuned for many more videos on science and space, and as always, stay curious and keep exploring. We'll see you next time.